When you take office, what will be your first priorities? What do you want to get out of the way first? I mean, for example, like the little things I talked about governance, rather. What kind of staff will you have? What kind of
Um,
people should apply? You know,
People that should apply, I mean, certainly Oaklander.
yeah, that's a plus.
You got to be, fully a part of our community. Um, and you've got to be someone with a heart for the people, not just the policies, but someone who has a heart for the people and is in community with people now. That's something that you really can't train. You know, you need to have someone that's coming onto your team with the issues that are before us, that has been involved, that understands the issues, that can certainly affect change with policy, but really being able to show up to hear and be responsive with me in community, that is key. And so I believe that there'll be an Oaklander who fits that level of leadership with experience, in government, preferably, that can work alongside of me and work alongside with community to make sure that we stay at the table and that we coordinate effectively from my office into the community, from the community back to my office, and work with me to maintain accountability with community in leading and serving them.
And as far as
And so I'm certainly our district is a community of color. This district that we live in, it's predominantly Latinx and African American, and it's one of the last districts with a strong African American, Black community. And so, making sure that my staff is reflective of our community is equally important.
what among the problems do you want to tackle in District 7 first, given the coronavirus and everything else? What's on their priority list there?
Um, I mean, there are a number of priorities when we look at District 7 and the city. I mean, certainly, one of the things that's before the city now is where we are with how we allocate funding from our police department. Over $400 million is allocated to that department. We've not seen the type of representation from our police department. When we look at what's taken place over the city, what's taken place over the country, a lot of those issues of deep systemic racism in the culture of police, it's here too. And those are some of the things that we need to be honest about. And I believe that we're certainly working to address those. Those issues have come to light more in the midst of everything that's taken place nationally and locally. But looking at where we stand with our budget, that's going to be a critical thing. Many of us don't have the access and insight to some of that data that would be helpful to know how best to make decisions. And so being at the table to have access and opening up all the books to a number of these areas that we would like to progress, I think is going to be critical. I've got to see what's going on before us to know how best to determine the strategy and the approach to work to address the issues that we have. Public safety, so public safety would certainly be in areas like where are we tracking against the goals? We've got these incredible task force that are being launched. How are we doing with assessing ourselves and the metrics on how we're progressing with those goals, how we're progressing with decisions as it relates to what we're allocating? Public safety is a big issue for us in District 7 as it is for the city. I know you're away right now, but you hear about the loss of life, and it's a public health crisis for us. In Oakland, 60% of those who've lost their lives are also Black young men. And so the inequities of those who have lost life and the ripple effect of those who are impacted by the lack of public safety and the rising crime in areas, that's something that we have got to address immediately. I know that there are things in the work now with our police department and launching ceasefire strategies and efforts. We've got Reverend Demita, who is amazing, who just come up into leadership in ceasefire. We have a new program called OPD Cares, and we've got to hold ourselves accountable to how we show up caring. How we show up caring with trauma-informed policing, how we show up with where and how we allocate the budget, how we continue to lift up our police commission. And there's a measure before us, Measure S1, that I support to ensure that they are strengthening that oversight and the staffing needed and rewriting some of OPD's policies and holding them accountable. And so that's really where we stand as it relates to public safety. But that's a big one for me. I know the deep weight of that type of trauma and grief. My daughter's oldest brother, Brandon, was murdered at the age of 22. And I love Brandon as my son. And it was in the midst of working for Assemblymember Nancy Skinner, advocating for her gun violence packages, working to bring community together, our faith leaders, our gun violence advocates here at the local level and the state level, that we were even pushing for one particular bill called AB 48, which was called her bullet bill, that Brandon's life was lost to one bullet. And so when we talk about public safety, we talk about how we reimagine public safety, how we invest equitably into violence intervention, prevention, and trauma and healing care, and these alternative methods of public safety measures. All of that is going to be very important to me as I sit at that table, and the decisions that will come out of that, and our responsiveness to how we show up in community around those items. So certainly public safety. Housing stability is one of the issues that it's so prevalent. It's before. It's like it's the issue that you see everywhere. There's so many people who have been displaced and evicted, and the majority of those are, again, Black people. And so when we look at some of the issues in Oakland, it's amazing to see in a community that certainly has been one that has been known to uplift the Black power movement and strengthen the lives of Black people, that we are faced as a Black community with a number of disparities that have put us at greater risk even during COVID, more so. And I'll have to give you a link to an article and calls to action that I lifted up in partnership with the Black Cultural Zone, Greenlining Institute, and as a member of BWAPA, Black Women Organized for Political Action. I serve as one of their state policy advisors, and we put out a call to action for our local and state and national leaders on some areas that we are demanding change as it relates to the Black community. And also the brown community, our communities of color. And so housing stability is something that you'll continually see me digging deep in. I serve on the board of Satellite Affordable Housing. I work now to make sure that we fund and source and finance a pipeline of housing, but we need housing now. We have to come up with creative solutions right now with the assets that we have in the city, or the ability to negotiate with assets that are available, getting people into permanent housing solutions and save quality temporary shelter as we work to prioritize those housing needs, and working in community with those who are unhoused to even know how best to show up to serve them and help to strengthen them as we work to bring that stability in their lives.
Hey, there's a person who has a question. Mind if